Hello, and welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am excited for this next episode. This is a really interesting topic, and this will be really helpful for a lot of operators out there. The topic today is mediation as a compliance strategy for regulated cannabis operations. So, a little bit about my background. I got my start in the cannabis industry in 2009 here in Denver, Colorado, and worked in vertically integrated cannabis operations for about 6 years. And in 2015, I founded my company, 𝗨𝗪 Consulting, and help operators prepare for operational readiness and to launch their cannabis facilities across the United States. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to my next guest, Bethany Niebauer, and her company is Axial Resolutions. Welcome, Bethany. I am so happy you're here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenny. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so why don't you give a little bit about your background and your history in the cannabis industry so our listeners can get to know you?
Yeah, so I have been in the industry for about 10 years now. I first got in writing license applications for clients in emerging markets. And this was, I'm sure you remember, this was back in the days when license applications were extremely competitive,
Yeah.
very lengthy. They could be hundreds, occasionally thousands of pages. So, in order to do that, I had to become very familiar with each state's regulations and the state by state model of cannabis and be able to recite how states were different and how they're similar when it comes to cannabis policy. From there, a couple of years ago, I started burning out with license applications and knew that I didn't want to do it forever. And this is the Cliff Notes version because it was painful when I was in it, but now it's funny. Through a lot of conversations and through hiring a business coach, came to realize that the relationships in this industry are really powerful and very meaningful for me. And I probably don't need to tell you that cannabis is a fractious place. We have a lot of trouble getting on with one another, unfortunately. And we are very sadly famous for our business divorces. And when I tell people outside the industry that hemp people and marijuana people don't get along, as a rule, they will not sit next to each other at the conference. They are always in disbelief about that. So we're an industry that is growing and is facing a lot of the struggles that older industries have already gone through. Some of that is figuring out how to get along with one another. And this is a roundabout way of explaining how I came to mediation.
Sure.
I do care about people. I care about conflict. And I am personally holding space for the idea that maybe one day we could be a more united industry that treats each other with kindness and respect and maybe also even pays its bills on time. What would that be like?
Yeah, I would say I'm 1,000% for that idea and that future industry. I think it's important to be kind and thoughtful and to be collaborative in the cannabis industry. And I think there's a lot of moving pieces to why people are doing the things that they do. I think we have a regulated product right now, and then some markets, it's completely illegal still. There's still the illicit market going on. And I think naturally, it attracts not all good players that come into the industry. And also, not everyone has a business background or owning a business background. And there's a lot of people that this is their first time even owning a business, and they don't always come in with the correct skill set. And so that's why I really love this idea and what you're putting out there and what you're doing. And then not only that, but the fact I'm excited that you're going to weave it into compliance and how it can affect compliance and how it can affect the operations, because this is like a dirty secret that's going on out there right now. We see a lot of these companies failing, but sometimes we're not really digging under all the layers to the reason why. And maybe they're blaming the industry itself or where it's at or how the marketplace is or the economy or all these things. But where's the responsibility from the top down? And that's why I'm excited to have you on today. So we're going to go ahead and dive in so we can give the listeners some context. And we're going to start with the basics. So, what is exactly mediation, especially for those who may not be familiar and how the process works? So, a lot of this is new for me, which is why I'm happy to have you here to talk about these things, because I'm learning with everyone that's listening as well.
I like to give the dictionary definition in these moments. So mediation is a voluntary and confidential process in which a neutral third party helps people in conflict have a constructive conversation and understand each other's perspectives, and then negotiate a mutually acceptable resolution.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about, how is mediation different from arbitration or litigation? And if you could give a little bit of background, like what arbitration might be, in case there are people listening that don't know what arbitration is. And
Yep.
obviously we know litigation is something being litigated in a court of law.
Yeah, arbitration and mediation both fall under the umbrella of alternative dispute resolution. And I think what's important to know there is attorneys are the ones who coined the phrase alternative dispute resolution, because they see litigation as the primary method for resolving disputes. So you have to hold that in your head while you think about this. Mediation, I just gave a definition for that. So that's a voluntary process. People sit down and they work out their problems. It can take as little as a few hours, or it can be maybe 2 weeks. Arbitration, on the other hand, is a light courthouse model. That is where a neutral third party acts as a judge, can make rulings about evidence or procedure. It very commonly, the parties will be represented by attorneys in that. And then at the end of it, the arbitrator will make a decision, which is called an award. And both parties are bound to it. A lot like a trial, it will be less expensive than a trial, but it will still be more expensive than mediation, and there is no room for negotiation in arbitration.
I feel like there might be a common belief out there that mediation, that's just something like for divorces, or no one would ever think, why would I need that in the cannabis industry? But my gosh, I bet you there are some people out there that need some mediation right now, I'm sure.
Yes, it is a very common misconception that this is just for family law disputes. That is probably, it might be the most common for mediation, but it's not the only use. If you want to solve a problem with someone and simultaneously preserve the relationship so that you can continue working together, mediation is an ideal choice, right? Because in litigation or in arbitration, there will be a winner and a loser. The loser probably isn't going to want to be friends with the winner after that. So if you are in a situation where you really need to keep working with this person, or need to have a relationship, need to keep being a vendor for them, etc., mediation is a really great choice. And I just like to throw this in there. You and I have been in the industry for a while now. And when it was new, maybe it felt okay to burn a relationship because it was booming. There were new products on the market. There were new stores. There was such a fast pace to it. If you burned a relationship with somebody on Wednesday, don't even worry about it, because somebody with that exact same skill set is going to be around on Friday, and you can just keep going. That does not feel true anymore. The industry is getting smaller. We need to preserve the relationships and the contracts that we have, because I don't think we can't just replace them constantly like we have in the past.
Yeah, I do think some burning still going on out there, and I think people do, unfortunately, burn other people. They're not paying them, or there's some, unfortunately, consultants are getting a bad name, and there's consultants that have done some people pretty wrong out there. And so that can be challenging. But I like something that you said, what I caught, which I think is interesting, because just to clarify, mediation can be used with your vendor, right? Not just, hey, me and my partner own this dispensary, or we own this cultivation facility. We're having some issues right now, but I can't walk away from the business. Because a lot of people, they have their whole lives invested in these operations. It's not all big MSOs and corporate cannabis out there. There are a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that have thrown all their money into these operations. And so talk a little bit about that, how this is not just for operators, but why would a vendor want to use this?
Great question. Yeah, I think for the reasons that you have stated just now, if it's a situation where the dispensary is the primary vendor, or the primary contract for this vendor, and you can't just let it go, you may want to try mediation.
And how does this relate to compliance? What is the context around compliance and mediation?
So I think we get into this as compliance is about relationships, right? I think we have this idea that compliance is a checklist, and that's definitely a part of it, like routines and procedures and having all of your processes nailed to the wall. That's a big part of compliance, but all of that is carried out by humans. And if the humans don't understand what's expected of them, or if they are being held responsible for somebody else's actions or inactions, or if they don't trust their colleagues or coworkers or supervisors to carry out the checklist, compliance is going to break down. Compliance is about relationships from top to bottom. And I think that's something we tend to forget about. We tend to think it's about just routine list and doing the same processes that are approved over and over again. But there's a lot to do with trust. So if you don't trust one another, your compliance is going to fall apart.
Oh gosh, I feel like I could make a list of 100 things for why compliance is going to fall apart, but that's definitely one of them. And I would like to add, I always try to remind people that even though we're talking about relationships with humans, but you do have a relationship with your business.
Yeah.
Your business is a relationship. Are you engaged in your business? What are the things that you're doing? And then you also talked about the systems. Those are relationships too. And if you're not engaged in the systems, or you don't even know who's in charge of those systems, if you're not defining what everyone's job is, including owners, right? I would feel like you have total chaos, which kind of sets the scene for the things that you're talking about. And then you end up needing mediation and somebody kind of coming in to clean up this big bomb that went off in the business.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And just to reiterate that, a lot of times roles will be partially delineated, but there is ambiguity where things overlap.
Yeah.
And that's where another compliance breakdown happens, because maybe it was my job, but I thought Jenny was going to do it and Jenny thought I was going to do it. And now we have failed this audit because the task didn't get done the way it should have.
I bet you that happens all the time.
But it does.
I feel like it probably happens more than people even realize, because I think a reason a lot of these operators struggle, because the lack of communication or things aren't being communicated appropriately. I want to talk about why this matters in cannabis. Someone might be thinking, well, why would I need mediation in cannabis? I actually like this idea. I think this is great. Imagine all the relationships that could actually be saved. There's some probably really good relationships out there that have come across some speed bumps. And this industry is not for the lighthearted at all. At all. This is not if you're sensitive or you're thin-skinned or you don't like change. This is probably not the industry. If you don't like getting out of your comfort zone, this is the wrong industry. When does it make sense to turn to mediation versus going, I think I need to go to an attorney? Like, how do I discern that?
Yeah, that can be tricky. It's complicated, right? I think mediation should usually be a first stop. Something like 95% of civil cases are settled out of court before they get to litigation. A huge percentage. And I think that tells us two things. Is one, most people are open to a negotiated settlement. And two, people are using attorneys to negotiate those settlements, which is fine. They're perfectly good at it. It is going to cost you a lot more than what a mediator would charge. So if you are open to a negotiated settlement and you feel like the other party is probably open to that, mediation is a great choice. Here is the problem with mediation. And that is, I, as a mediator, do not have the authority to enact penalties if somebody doesn't want to mediate, right? And if you are summoned or subpoenaed to court and you don't go, there are going to be very real, very painful consequences for you.
Bench warrant.
Yes.
It's called a bench warrant. Coming my way.
As a mediator, I don't have the power to do that. If somebody doesn't want to mediate, that's my tough luck.
So it has to be mutual.
Right. And then another situation, and I think this could happen, this is relevant to a lot of the MIPS out there, If someone steals your recipe or your intellectual property, you're
Ah,
probably going to want an attorney to come up with a restraining order or an injunction to prevent them from using it.
yeah.
You're going to need an attorney very quickly for that. But after that, mediation might work. Like maybe there's a story about the employee felt they were owed wages, or felt somehow they were owed this recipe or formulation plan, whatever it was.
Yeah, too. And I also know, flipping that a little bit, I know sometimes that employees will be put in a position where they're creating things. And typically, this is why it's important to have contracts with your employees and handbooks and all that stuff. So employees know, like, whatever they create while they're at that business gets to own it. So if you are creating recipes and all these different things, it doesn't mean you just get to up and take it with you because you were on the clock creating those things. So it can get sticky, and I can see how employee would also probably think that they could take it with them and go out there and use it in the world. We know that happens a lot, especially like SOPs, recipes too, process, especially when we get into like secret sauce with extraction, more of these like really hush things that people are trying to protect. I know we did talk a little bit about cannabis compliance, but I'm going to circle back over this. Like you said, it's often seen as a checklist, and you talked about how it's really about relationships and communication and mutual understanding. Is there anything else that you want to add to that area?
I would just reiterate, until compliance is carried out entirely by AI, then it's done by humans, and they require trust to do their jobs effectively.
I think too, like when you start getting into kind of the really scary stuff that can really mess up your business, one, finances or taxes, things like packaging and labeling, anything that affects public safety. And then we get into things like your seed to sale. So where we're tracking the plant from seed to sale, and we start involving those areas, and the ownership of that business are having issues and things are breaking down and falling apart. Those are typically the first areas that are affected. You have to remember at the end of the day that whatever you do in your business, your employees will replicate. They will replicate what you do. There's a guy that I really like reading his books, and he's always saying, if you're sloppy, your business is sloppy. If you're dishonest, your business is dishonest. If you're not organized, your business is not organized. And as an owner, you're the example in your business. And if they see you just not getting along and there's chaos and the systems are breaking down, they're just going to stop caring.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, put another way, culture starts at the top.
It does.
Yeah.
It
So,
really does.
yeah, if your employees see you constantly belittling someone or constantly reading your passive aggressive emails, they're going to know that behavior will be accepted at this company, and there's no reason for them to do any differently.
Yeah, and that can be a shame too, because then what happens is you get employees that think that environment is normal, and then when they go to the next job, they bring that with them, which is really unfortunate. It's not good for the business, it's not good for the staff, it's not good for the customers. We're gonna jump into kind of like patterns, pitfalls, and prevention. So, how do unresolved internal conflicts show up down the line, like in audits, license renewals, or even staff turnover?
Yeah. So this goes back to relationships. I think staff turnover is probably the most obvious one. Employees tend not to stick around when they don't understand what's expected of them, or they're held accountable for someone else's mistakes. That nobody wants to work there. Everyone wants to work in a place where they know what their job is and they are rewarded for doing it, or at least recognized for doing it consistently and correctly.
Yeah,
And again, relationships. The owners of the company need to trust that processes are carried out so that audits, you can pass them with flying colors. License renewals, I've done them. They are painstaking, and that needs to be done with a high degree of attention to detail.
it sure
And if people,
does.
yeah, if people don't trust that's happening or know that it's not, things are going to fall apart.
Yeah. And if you can mess up on your renewal, and then it just depends on what state and municipality, and do they hate cannabis in your state or your local town? And if you mess up on that license renewal because you missed something, are they going to say, tough luck, your
Yeah.
license is expired? And so my other question is, can there be mediation with staff? Because some staff are entry level, but then we have employees that are not entry level and they know all the ins and outs. And we have management. Sometimes an employee could be the COO or CFO of a company and get more into the executive level. So how can mediation be used with like employees at different levels?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great use of it in a workplace setting, is negotiating employee disputes.
Yeah.
I know there are some, not too many unions in cannabis, but when there is in a general strike I don't know, I think we have a couple in grocery stores right now that are on strike in Denver.
Safeway.
Yes, thank you. Mediation is how those strikes or disputes are worked out. They are using a actual mediator. It is through negotiation. And it's incredibly common in other industries as well to use mediation for employee disputes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of places are unionizing. I think it's called UFCW is one of the cannabis unions. So if they're not unionized, they can have somebody come in and help them with the mediation. What kind of disputes do you think there might be?
Oh, there could be any variety. There can be disputes between management and employees, or it can be more lateral, where it's employees in adjoining sections, teams are not getting along, and that's affecting the business in a negative way.
Okay.
Yeah, there can also be disputes between like lower level supervisors and their employees. Yeah, mediation incredibly useful for employee disagreements.
And it's not always about money or wages.
Not always.
Sometimes people think mediation or disputes with staff is always about wages, but it could also be about systems and processes, and that there's clearly a breakdown of those things going on in the business.
Yeah, it could be about things that are happening in the parking lot. Like, it doesn't have to be purely financial, though that is also very common.
And then also, what are some red flags or real world signs that mediation could help an operation?
In a nutshell, if the vibes feel off, then mediation could be called for. I think more concrete examples would be passive aggressive emails, mounting tension. Many years ago, I had a job where I would show up in the parking lot and park my car, and I would need 10 or 15 minutes to prep myself to go into the building because it was so tense in there and I did not want to be there. If there are decision gridlocks, if ownership or lower level supervisors, managers cannot make decisions and need to, or if there is just, as I've mentioned several times now, if there are pure breakdowns in trust, utter breakdowns in trust, those are really great examples of when a mediator could help.
Yeah, I think another red flag would be theft.
Oh, for sure. Yes, absolutely. It could be. But again, one of the benefits of mediation is to preserve the relationship.
Yeah.
If it's an employee who is stealing product, do you really want to preserve this?
I was more looking at the aspect, not obviously the person that's stealing, but that could cause a lot of anxiety for other employees.
Oh, sure.
If theft, I had 𝗪𝗏 Risk on a couple episodes ago, and he was saying 80% of theft is internal in the cannabis industry, which I thought was a crazy number. And some operators, they turn the other way. They look the other way because they can't staff their companies. And I thought that kind of environment, if I'm a good person and I'm not stealing, but I know this is going on, that would cause me anxiety. I would assume that would cause anxiety in other people, or maybe I'm just a crazy compliance lady. I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense. That if you are seeing theft from somebody else and you're not a part of it, but you know that it's being tolerated and you don't want to speak up for any number of reasons, yeah, that's going to create tension at a minimum.
Yeah. And then also, too, the mistreatment of other employees. Sometimes people in management positions really shouldn't be in that management position. And that happens all the time. People get put in leadership positions that shouldn't be. They overinflate their value.
what is it, the Peterson principle, where you rise to the level of your incompetence? Like you go, so like you climb the corporate ladder and you get to a point and that you cannot continue to climb because your skills do not encompass your current role.
Yeah, I think sometimes you cap out, and
Yeah.
I don't know those principles, but I do know that you can get to a point where you're beyond your skill set, and at that point, you would need to further your education, and you would need to get more training. There's things that you could do if you get to the point where you don't understand something that, you're not gonna be able to move to the next position until you get you're gonna need to get the experience or training or education or whatnot, and then sometimes it's just not for everyone. Sometimes some people just aren't meant to be leaders, and sometimes people aren't meant to own a business. It's not for everyone. I think businesses fail in the United States at a huge rate within the first 5 years, and it seems in the cannabis industry because it's this new thing, even though 15, whatever, 16, 18 years that we're in. I know California obviously started before Colorado, but it's still new. And I see lots of people starting businesses in the cannabis industry, whether it's a regulated business or it's an ancillary business. And Bethany, you've been at this 10 years. It's hard work, huh?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard work, and I didn't get all this gray hair for no reason. It was earned over 10 years. You gave some great examples. You talked about relational trust and that how that's such a critical and often overlooked part of staying compliant in the industry.
Yeah, without it, you have no business. Just to not to put too fine a point on it, the employees need to be able to trust upper management to lead the business in a safe and compliant way. And upper management needs to be able to trust employees to carry out the functions of their job description in a consistent and compliant way. And when that trust is gone, or when it starts to crumble, the business is at stake. And I don't want to scare anyone, but I don't think I'm overstating that. If employees cannot trust management, you're going to have a really hard time retaining employees. And if you don't have employees, how is this going to work long term?
I try to be on this podcast. It's all about being direct and tell the truth and to be as honest as I can. Because at the end of the day, operators need to have the context of the reality of things that happen in these operations. And I think it's really important to have that wake up call and to be in the reality. Let's move everyone out of the fantasy of cannabis. Because when everyone is in the licensing stage or in the fantasy of cannabis, they have no idea. They haven't been smacked in the face enough yet. And then once they open the door, they're going to get smacked in the face. And then they're going to be in the reality of what they just signed up for. And it's a lot of curveballs. And so it's true. Like, you have to have trust with your employees. And if you don't have trust, your staff, they're not going to do good things.
And that,
They're not.
yeah, no, I agree. And another aspect of that, businesses need to be able to trust each other. You need to trust your vendors. They need to be able to trust you. I don't know. I get a little bit poetic because this is a relatively new industry and the legal aspect is relatively new.
Sure.
And none of us built this all on our own. Like, we have really had to rely on each other and learn to trust one another and learn who to trust and who not to trust. And that's a big part of building an industry on top of just building a business. I don't know. I would challenge your listeners. Tell me something that relational trust doesn't affect.
Yeah. It's true. And you have to think about the culture that creates. And at the end of the day, one, I always like to give a shout out. We would not be here if it wasn't for patients. That's how this industry was created, because of medical cannabis patients and advocates that went out there and worked their tails off. And then we have the employees. And I would also like to say this industry would not be here without all the employees, including all the ones that are underpaid out there. And I think sometimes they feel slighted and they perceive, and they don't always know, right? They don't have the full context, but they perceive and think that a lot of these companies are making tons of money. And some of them are, but some of them aren't.
Yeah.
Some of them aren't. And I think it can just create a lot of conflict. I think there's a lot of natural conflict that happens in these facilities. So yeah, that's something to think about. Relational trust and just what an important role it plays. And relationships are so important in this industry. You have to have somebody on the team that's a relationship builder. You got to have somebody that knows how to build relationships because somebody has to bridge the gap.
I think more people need to know how to build relationships. We can't have one person on the team and just let do it all. I guess depending on how big the team is, maybe you could get away with one person. But yeah, there could also be situations where you just need a neutral party to come in and help sort things out.
If you think about it, your staff, they're relationship builders. You're training your staff to communicate with your customers. The teams need to build a relationship with each other in order to trust each other, that everyone is a team, and so on, the different levels that there are in a business. So yeah, that's a good point too. I want to jump into tools and tactics and talk a little bit about this. What are some preventative steps or tools that cannabis operators can use to build this kind of culture of proactive conflict resolution?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always say in this situation, build space for communication. And there's a lot of ways you can go with that. I recommend that supervisors have a meeting scheduled on the calendar, either once or twice a month, up to you, and have time on the calendar. Block it out. If there's a performance issue to discuss, great, talk about that. If there are questions about processes, great, talk about that. If everything's running smooth, talk about football, learn about one another. We build trust in these tiny moments when we are just humans.
Yeah.
If it's a larger organization, some sort of town hall or all hands meeting where people are encouraged and permitted to ask questions is crucial. I know lots of companies do town hall style meetings, but the questions are all plants, or you do an all hands meeting, but lower level employees are not going to feel comfortable speaking up and asking about a new policy change. I think things like that will go so far in creating a culture of trust.
Yeah. There are a lot of tools out there, and I know we're going to talk about some of your tools and recommendations, but I can't remember. I was at an event once where they had an app and then the audience could pose questions and you could do it anonymously, like a suggestion box.
Yeah.
Suggestion box is 1990s, right? 80s.
Yeah.
You're going to put the box on the wall, you're going to fill out the paper, and you might not even write your name, and you're like, hey, can we get tacos on Tuesday in the lunchroom or something like that? But some people still do suggestion boxes, but if you're doing that town hall, I think there's platforms or apps out there where they could just do it from their phone.
Yeah. There's a certain kind of person who can be a great employee and who can follow directives if they understand completely why it is that we are following this policy. And I happen to be one of these people. When I had a job, I can go along with the plan when I understand why we have chosen this plan. And that's not uncommon at all. So when you create a culture where people can ask questions about why is this the plan that we have chosen? What other plans were considered? Are we still in a phase where we can suggest new plans? When that sort of communication is encouraged and responded to respectfully at a minimum, it makes the business an awful lot stronger.
I agree. There's nothing better than a why. Why for everything. You can't just say, here are the rules and regulations. Why? As an employee, why does it need to be important to me? What am I supposed to do with these regulations, and why should it be important? And I couldn't agree more with the why. I feel like I beat that one down a little bit, but I'm all about the why. Can you share some sample questions or communication prompts that might reveal cracks before they become these full-blown issues?
Yeah, I recommend trying to pull people aside. If you can offer privacy, that tends to feel a little bit more intimate. That said, don't pull somebody into the fly closet. That's gross. But if you can...
Or a mop closet.
Don't do that. It's your head. You can offer quasi-comfortable setting and then frame things with I. Jenny, I have noticed our last couple interactions, I'm picking up on some tension. And I don't know if that's just something I'm picking up on, or maybe you're really stressed, maybe you're not sleeping well, but I wanted to create some space to talk about that if there's any there. Yeah, but start with the I rather than, Jenny, why are you so stressed? Why are you snapping at people? Yeah, whenever you can, frame it from your observations.
I like that. I'm actually a big fan of I. This is something that I've been working on personally for 10 years. Not saying you, not saying they, not saying we, and then really working hard on saying I, because there's a sense of responsibility when you say I. And if I'm saying I'm not making someone else feel bad and wrong. One, I'm taking responsibility for what I'm talking about. Two, I'm not pulling somebody into my stuff, right? There is no we, it's really I. And the person I'm talking to, they're not going to feel bad. They're not going to feel like they're in trouble or threatened. And if you say, I think somebody would stay more open and not shut down. Because I think when you do it the other way, as soon as you say you just boom, you just shut that person down.
Yeah. Like, I thought we had agreed to, I don't know, go to lunch on Tuesday, rather than why didn't you show up to lunch on Tuesday?
So I'm a big fan of the I. I want to jump into the tool. What is the value of including mediation or also the ADR? And I'm going to let you know that acronym is Alternative Dispute Resolution, clauses and contracts, and whether it's with partners, vendors, or employees.
Having an ADR clause in your contract is the gold standard for mediation or arbitration. Because, as I mentioned earlier, the easiest time to get somebody to agree to mediate is when you are still friends, when you are still on very good terms, when you are starting the relationship and signing the contract. So put it in from the beginning that, listen, if we are having trouble seeing eye to eye, let's start with a mediator. If that doesn't work, you can still go to arbitration or go to litigation. And the lawyers that are listening to this will know this, but anything that is said in mediation is excluded from evidence in trial. I'm trying to come up with a scenario in my head. So I don't know, like if Jenny, if I slip and fall in your factory and I'm coming to you because I want you to pay my medical bills, and in mediation, you offer to pay $50,000 or whatever, and I don't accept it because I'm after 100, the fact that you offered 50 cannot be admitted as evidence if and when you go to trial. So people absolutely can have the initiative to negotiate in good faith in mediation. Because I don't want anyone to think if I make an offer in mediation, they can use that at trial to say, Jenny, she was willing to pay. Yeah, that's going to fall apart almost immediately.
That's really helpful. And I just want to make sure, were there any other tools that you wanted to bring up?
I don't think so. Put it in your contract with your vendor, your operating agreement, your employees. Put an ADR clause in your contract.
I think it's a really good idea, something that people don't think about. And then I kind of want to talk about changing the culture. Let's change the culture. And obviously doing this episode is a step in trying to just create context to put it out there. What is the world without context? How do you even know something exists if people don't talk about it? And so in wrapping up, why do you believe making mediation the first step and not the last resort can actually save operators time, money, and their relationships?
Yeah, because I think we have said over and over again today, your business runs on relationships. What you do to protect and preserve your relationships ends up protecting and preserving your business. So if you are running this business for the long haul, and that's, I think most people are, nobody wants to run a business that'll crash out in 5 years, then you need to have a strategy for preserving your relationships.
Yeah.
And the sad news is we are humans. We are going to fight. Like, we are going to have disagreements. And if you can see disagreements and conflict as an opportunity rather than an annoyance or a setback, you are so much farther ahead of the competition. Like that will go so far to preserving your business and making it run smoothly and cleanly and efficiently.
I love that. Oh gosh, making it as an opportunity. I think if more people turned making mistakes into an opportunity, having disagreements into an opportunity to say, oh, what's going on? Let's look under this layer. At the end of the day, it's only going to make you, one, a better business owner. It's going to help improve your business. And it's really just showing you there's some cracks in the foundation.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got some cracks in the foundation. There is no perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect is an illusion. There is no perfect. We're human. No human is perfect. I don't care how much, what they look like or how perfect they look. There's no perfect. And at the end of the day, there's going to be disputes, there's going to be disagreements. People are going to get hurt or triggered, or there's going to be misunderstandings, or there's going to be a collapse of communication, or the systems that are in place might not even be working. And these things have to get worked out. You need to know how to solve problems, right? You cannot be successful in this industry if you are not good at problem solving. I mean, that's mediation, is problem solving. There's an
Yeah.
issue, there's something's coming up. We need to come and find a solution or a resolution that you talk about. What's the solution? But to me, that's just like a natural part of being in the cannabis industry. You're really just trying to find solutions and resolutions for all the things that you're coming up against. And that's something that's nonstop in the industry.
I completely agree. Yes.
Yeah, I think this is such a great topic. I think solving problems is really important and coming up with solutions. It's better than just throwing the towel and walking away. And I think it's always important to try. So thank you so much for coming on and being a guest and talking about this topic. I really hope it helps listeners, and I really appreciate you. And for putting 10 years plus in the cannabis industry. You're a cannabis industry veteran. Just to give the listeners a reminder, if you like watching videos, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is Under the Microscope with Jenny. Also, if you like to listen and do streaming apps, this podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Pandora Radio. So I just want to thank you again, Bethany, for joining me today, and to thank our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you.